Hello, I'm John Speights. Welcome to the Veterans Roundtable. Our guest for this segment is a Raleigh resident, Mr. Charles Lloyd. Charles, we're delighted you're able to come by and share your knowledge with us today.
John, it's good to be here, and I think it's about time somebody knew what the U.S. Navy Armed Guard was.
I might explain to our viewers, Charles is a Navy veteran of World War II, and for some of our viewers, including myself, who have seen some movies of cargo-carrying ships in World War II, of merchant marine vessels, I was surprised to learn that those movies weren't entirely complete, were they, Charles?
No, they left out the Armed Guard.
Could you, yes, please tell us briefly about the Navy Armed Guards?
Well, we were just a special group of volunteers that did a job in World War II that nobody knew about. We were the gunners and signalmen and officers and radiomen that served aboard a cargo, Army transport, the tankers and all that made the mermaids run, that carried food and provisions overseas to the troops, and the guns and the ammunition, and we protected lives not only of our lives, but the merchant marine that was doing a job servicing the ship and getting the ship over there. And also we protected many troops that was aboard these cargo ships, along with all the tanks and ammunition, and that's what our job is now today, is to try to tell a little something about it. And
during the war, were you able to tell your families what you were doing or the name of the ship that you were on at that time?
No. When the first war started, no one knew about it. I didn't know about it until when it started, until lately when we got involved with a reunion and got on a committee. This started when the Americans and British were losing so many ships, cargo ships, in 1940, early 41. And the first Armed Guard crew was actually in World War I, but it deactivated after World War I, and it's picked up again in April of 41 when they sent them down to Little Creek, Virginia for gunnery training, which later turned out to be an amphibious base, and we went next door at Camp Shell, Virginia, which has been deactivated now, and we're out of service, but and I hope we don't ever be needed again, but that's our job. And there was 144,970 of us, and 1,810 of them lost their lives, plus the injured and countless. We don't have a record on that, the injuries and what became of them.
And Charles, you've been organizing veterans of the Navy Armed Guards, and I believe you have a local meeting here once a month in Raleigh?
Right, we meet out at the Barbecue Lodge on number 1 North, and it's just local, and we have people coming from out of state now. We put the word out, and they're coming in, and it's good for the Armed Guard and good for us and good for the community.
And I believe during World War II, in addition to yourself, your 2 brothers were also in the Armed Guard?
Yes, I had another brother, Lonnie, that stays here in Raleigh. We were aboard the same ship. We went in boot camp together and served together and on the same ship together, and had one brother, Lonnie Whitson, that was one of the first Armed Guards that went in service. And when he volunteered, they didn't know what it was all about. And if he'd have known, he probably wouldn't have joined it. But thankfully, people like him and others did join the Armed Guard and did a good job. And he was very fortunate. He had one ship that was sunk out from under him in 1943 in November off of Newfoundland. But 3 days before the war was over from the European theater in the Atlantic, he was the last Armed Guard that got killed in the North Atlantic off Rhode Island.
So in his second ship sinking, he died?
That's right. He'd also participated in the Merman's Run, which was I think about 16 ships out of 42 made it there and back.
That's carrying cargo to Russia during World War II?
To Murmansk and Archangel, Russia.
In the Arctic Ocean area?
That's right.
But, well, of course, we're very sorry that one of your brothers lost his life, but the other brother, who was in the armed guard, also lives here in Raleigh and is still alive.
Oh, yeah, and he's active, just as active I am on getting the group together, and we're working together with them, and we started out with 55 names. In our first reunion, we went up in Winchester, Kentucky, and had a ball, and the group there says if we bring it to North Carolina, they would in turn carry it to Texas next year. So we did it. We carried it down to Wilmington, and we had about 200 armed guard plus their wives, and there, and went down to Texas. We had about 400 plus their wives there this year in 1984, and next year, April 24th through the 28th, I volunteered, and my brother, along with my brother.
That's your brother, Mr.
Lonnie.
Or Mr. L.D. Lloyd?
That's right, here in Raleigh. We volunteered to host it again and to do it at Norfolk, Virginia, and visit Shelton area, where we took our gunnery training there, where the other men did on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And if good luck happens and all, we'll go to San Francisco in 1986.
Well, you're putting in a lot of work to organize reunions.
Well, it's not work, it's all play.
Oh. And I believe in that context, Charles, you're putting the veterans of the armed guards onto computers for different purposes so that you can try to pair veterans who were shipmates during the war and get them together.
Right. That's right. We just got Andy Goodnight, which was in the American Legion down at Apex. We've just got him located with a friend of his out in the western part of Virginia. And the first time they'd been in contact with each other in 42 years, and they visited each other this past week. And it's just wonderful that he went up to visit with him, and they spent a good week together, and hopefully they'll come down and have breakfast with us in November.
You've gotten hundreds of letters from armed guard veterans?
Thousands.
Oh, is this a sample of several?
Yes, that's what came in yesterday. Thing.
Oh.
Some of them did. I see one blue one there was this one was a lady from California. She was in the armed guard waves there at Treasure Island. And I'd like to say right here that there were 3 armed guard bases where we shipped out of, and the one on the East Coast was Brooklyn, New York, Armed Guard Center at Brooklyn. They one down in Gulfport, Mississippi, and then a lot of them said it's New Orleans right there. And then we had the other one that was out in Treasure Island, California, and that's where most of them headquarters was out of. But they shipped out of every port practically in the United States, and went to almost every port in the world during World War II.
Oh, mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. Mm-hmm.
Our job, I'd say right here, John, our job was to man the guns, keep up the equipment, and protect from the planes, the subs, or any other apparatus or people that would have attacked us in World War II to get the provisions through. Mm-hmm. And that was our main purpose.
Yes. Incidentally, Charles, I believe you have the front cover of a newsletter that was used during World War II, was put out by the Armed Guard, I mean?
Yes, this right here is called The Pointer, which was put out on the East Coast at Brooklyn, New York. And this particular picture here shows 9 liberated armed guards after a 3-year internment, and they served off the SS Carlton, most of these did, and 2 of which, these are POWs. And they were sunk in the PQ-16 or 17 it was, that was headed to Murmansk, Russia.
That's the designation for a convoy of ships?
That's right. And you might hear about or heard of Walter Cronkite, and he's talking about PQ-16, which was in July, 1st of July, and PQ-17, which was July the 5th. Well, I know one of these guys that we're in contact with, his ship got damaged by an Earl torpedo, and they went back in port on PQ-16 and went back out on PQ-17, and July the 5th, his ship got sunk, and he was picked up by the Germans. One of the crew got picked up by a seaplane, the other got picked up by a sub and carried into Norway. And that's where he stayed until after the war.
Yes, Charles, when there were American survivors and lifeboats, how did the German submarines react to the lifeboats there?
Stories come in from every kind of source that we're getting there and trying to gather it up. Normally the Germans surfaced and asked them did they have enough provisions, and if they didn't have the provisions, something like that. Sometimes they would give them a little food, crackers, a compass, and tell them point them which way the nearest land was, or if there's no one there who knew how to work the compass, anything, and how to work it, and on the way. If they were going out, they didn't do too much for them, because once they go out and come back in, they would they were keep for space just like we were. I thought they were all combined in. And before I'd forget it, I'll tell you that they had about 600 submarines or more in World War II, maybe 7, 8, and 40,000 of their 60,000 submarine crew perished in World War II.
Of the German personnel?
Of the German personnel. And they took a worse beating than we did. Of course, they started it, and that's bygones, though.
And I didn't quite understand. Oh, when you said that, did you mean that the German submarines might not help survivors if the submarines had been out for a long time and didn't have many provisions left themselves?
Well, no, if they had provisions left or something like that, it just depends on whether they were going in and out. I know some of them sunk them, and they would come up and tell them the nearest land and wouldn't give them anything, but they were going out for a long cruise, see. And they kept all the provision for their set. Oh. Now the Japanese, they were a little bit different. My understanding from what I did not serve in the Pacific, I served in the Atlantic. But my understanding is that the Japanese did not treat them as fair. They would even surface and machine gun the lifeboats. Ooh. And leave them. And then there's different stories to tell, which nowadays we try to forget, but it's history.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Before we get into talking about the convoys for a moment, could we perhaps get back to when you first went into the Navy, Charles, and what happened from there?
Well, I was drafted, to be frank with you. But I guess if I knew then like I know now, I would volunteer and come on out of high school and went on in service. Mm-hmm. My little action may have helped. But we went up to boot camp at Bainbridge, Maryland.
That's a Navy basic
That's the
training?
Naval basic training. And by the way, I stopped by there, my brother and I did last year, and then the trees are growing up through the barracks and the drill holes and all that we took training on and everything, and this just letting it grow up like they do a lot of the bases where they don't need anymore. From there we went from boot camp. We came home on a little liberty in 9 days and back up and then volunteer for the Armed Guard, because our brother Whitson had told us that it was the best outfit then because of the loss of life. They had got it down to where it was pretty safe, and we wanted to be in the same outfit he did, so we volunteered for it and went down to Camp Sheldon, Virginia, took our training and went back up to Brooklyn, volunteered, and went out on the SS Myolis, which was a Greek liberty.
Your training in the Armed Guard, did that consist largely of gunnery school?
The training I got of the Armed Guard was firing ammunition, loading ammunition, and taking the barrels off the 20 millimeters and using the semi-fixed ammunition and different types of ammunition. And we were strictly gunners, except the few radiomen and signalmen and the lieutenant that was aboard ship that kept us under control. Or in other words, give our money and quarantine us to ship that we've got to fight while we're ashore.
Yes. For our viewers who may not be aware, what types of targets might you have to shoot at?
Well, there, and most of this was no targets. We were just practicing. Then they took us out to Down Neck, Virginia, and gave us the live ammo, and we had a old battleship that was sitting out in the Chesapeake, and we went out on a gun tub, and we shot about 5 rounds out of that, and we shot some 20 millimeter out of the drones that would draw it over us there on the beach, and got a little but we were trained with dummy ammunition and saved on ammunition. We was trained on that to do a good job, and we could do a good job too.
Yes, and now let me see, Charles, from my studying of some of your information, I believe that the personnel, in order to volunteer for the armed guard, had to have good eyesight, good hearing, good teeth.
Perfect.
Why good teeth?
Well, there's just one in the dentist out there on that water.
Oh, yes.
You may have to pull it out, but they've got the men that were in good health. Well, the submarine crew was the same way. You know, if you're on land, you can get to a hospital or something like that. But out there, you had your own little kit, and that's about it. Aspirins, and that was it.
Of course, as to why you need good eyesight, it's obvious to look for submarines and aircraft and so on. Incidentally, did they have infrared equipment to use back then?
No, but you had to have good night vision along with the other two. A lot of people just don't see it at night good. And you had to have good night vision. You were pretty well picked out of the group.
And then I thought it was interesting, right at the beginning of World War II, the merchant ships were not equipped with guns, or not very well, and some fake gun emplacements were put on board using telephone-type creosote poles and so on.
That's right. I heard of it. My brother told me about it. One that got killed told me about it, which I don't have any proof of it now, but I am getting some letters, and they saw them. And it's a fact. They were short with guns, and when you just start something like that, it's like getting into a fight. You're not prepared. You just might lose for a few minutes, but you can always come back. And we did.
I believe they did have some machine guns at the beginning of the war, although they weren't too effective.
They had the Lewis machine guns there, and they were morale boosters, what you might say. They said, well, I've got a gun, I can fire back at you, and the plane coming in with better weapons and everything else. But that soon changed. We had fair guns. Of course, there's just the best defense that we had was the destroyers, our escorts, destroyer escorts, and planes with a baby aircraft carrier. They later developed them, and they went along with us with the bi-wing airplanes, and they could spot a sub in the water if he showed too close to the surface to fire torpedoes, and they were just a target then. That's the reason they started suffering so many losses. But it was up into early '44 before we really started to do damage to them.
You might have to shoot at German aircraft, submarines, and were there some German surface ships?
Oh yeah, the Scharnhorst and sunk a lot of the cargo ships. Some of the cargo ships on there. One of the cargo ships, one of the German raiders, the Stier, S-T-I-R, I guess what it is. And both ships went down, and that's in history. They did a good job on that one. And
did you? Were you ever on a ship that fired at a German submarine?
No, I was fortunate. Of course, my age was a factor. We went in the latter part of the war. We was in the last convoy over, even though our brother got killed later, and there were other lives lost in the Atlantic. But we were in the last convoy, Ellie and I were, and we went to England and went over to Merrimass, and I'm at Belgium, Antwerp, Belgium, I'm sorry. Antwerp and Ghent, Belgium, and we were in Antwerp when the Germans surrendered. And of course, I guess they couldn't put up with both of us over there.
Do you remember anything about your training in submarine tactics or anti-submarine tactics?
Well, you were just stood back to back and on the ship, and you was taught and trained that while you was ashore, and also you had your pictures. You could tell at that time, you could tell practically every German plane by just a flash. If you looked up and saw them, you could lead them in, and it was just training.
Oh, did you have to identify them in just
Right, just a flash.
Oh, they would,
That was schooling.
in the training session, they would flash a silhouette of German whatever airplane or ship for
And the
just
109s, I could tell you by heart long then, but I lose them now.
and they would just flash it on the screen for a thousandth of a second, perhaps.
Right, because so many of our American planes and so many of the enemy planes were built practically identical. Some of the motors was the full-motored bombers, say. Some of them ours was probably, say, middle of the wing. The other ones dropped lower, and you had to distinguish those at a flash because, now don't get me wrong, I didn't do it, but a lot of men shot down their own planes. You don't look up too long when they're coming in. My understanding, you did.
Yes, and Charles, I understand that the armed guard were instructed to fire at a submarine, even if they couldn't see the submarine, even if the submarine perhaps had already surfaced below the surface of the ocean, nevertheless to keep firing because you might damage it.
They were well. You didn't fire too much that way, but if you were given orders to, you did put out. But if he surfaced, you didn't take a chance whether it was American sub or what. You fired on it, and we're worried about that later. Mm-hmm. Now, I did say on the last the convoy that we were in, we went to Russia. I mean England. We were under surveillance, and they dropped a lot of depth charges around us for 3 days. Now, whether there were subs out there or not, I don't know, but I remember the water had just boiled up from those depth charges. And if they sunk subs out there, I didn't know anything about it other than what we would get some scuttlebutt or something like that through. Mm-hmm. Now, John, I'd like to show you one thing here. This is some of the ship. This was at the S.O. tanker, F.W. Abrams, that was sunk. And this shows the actual sinking of that ship. That's in the Historical Society. Here's another one. This one showing it burning. And that was the Restore. Here's one with the hole in it where the torpedo blew a hole in it. Here's another one. This was a tanker. The Germans actually came up and shot this ship with their deck guns after the crew had abandoned ship, and then put another torpedo in it so they wouldn't have a ship to go back to. This is what some of them says that it looked like when their home went down. And this was their home away from home when they're out in the middle of that ocean. You had to be there to understand it. Here's a 5-inch 38 gun, which we got last and was real effective. And this is the one that's on the back of the Jeremiah O'Brien, which is in the San Francisco Harbor in California, as a historical site. Anybody out there can visit that, and it's a good show. I'll show you the other side, and which shows the ship there as it is completed. Mm-hmm. Here are the baby flat tops. These was the jobs that right here was really good for us. They were when they had little aircraft carriers on it and did the surveillance for us. This is the ships fixing to go out to the North Atlantic. And this is from the Maritime Commission photo here. A lot of these ships were. We also have a ship of books, Careless Word, A Needless Sinking by Art Moore. This came out in '83, and this shows all the ships, cargo ships sunk in the Atlantic. Mm-hmm. Also, we have the Liberty Ships by L.A. Sawyer, and this it's just a good book on them. It tells all the ships that was in it. Here is a book, The Plane Shooter, and this is our insignia. And this was down at Camp Sheldon, Virginia, the Armed Guard School. Inside on page 55 there's a picture of my brother and I, and we were together. And a lot of these guys, we have located them because on the back side in this book there's over 3,000 names here, and we took these and Xeroxed and sent it all over the United States, so everybody we can get.
Yes, Charles, we might mention to viewers who've just tuned in, we're talking to Mr. Charles Lloyd of Raleigh, and Charles is a veteran of the Navy in World War II, and he belonged to the Navy personnel who went aboard merchant ships during World War II and had guns aboard to help protect the merchant ships. We'll go ahead.
That's good. And we took this. Of course, we ran into another guy that had another one of these books. And so this is where we're located. One guy up in New Jersey found approximately 200 people in his area out of this book. I'd say about 150 of them are interested in it. And I think New Jersey will be a big factor next year.
Oh, with your reunion?
Right. We started out, as I said, with 55 names and 82 at Winchester, and we have over 1,650, near 1,700 now. We have them in computer. We have over 4,000 ships already in the computer, and they're building up every day. And it's just a good thing to get them together, and you should read some of the letters we get from these people.
Yes. Where are some of the upcoming reunions of Navy Armed Guard veterans coming up, Charles?
Our next reunion will be in Norfolk, Virginia. And it'll be at the Holiday Inn in Norfolk, and they can get in touch with my brother L.D. and I have the address here on this paper here, and they can contact us, and we'd be glad to give them information on it. And they better make the reservation early because the hotels are filling up already.
Okay, the simplest way for people to get in touch with you, Charles, probably is to look up Mr. C.A. Lloyd in the Raleigh phone book here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Charles, where was the most dangerous part of the ocean when you were a member of the Armed Guards?
Before you even got out of the harbor, some of them got sunk right in Chesapeake Bay, but I'm talking up and down the eastern part of North Carolina, and up from North Carolina north, and in the North Atlantic. And then the ones that got really battered was the PQ 16 and 17 that went to Murmansk, Russia, and the ones that went in there later on, up until about 1943.
And in some, as you indicated, in some ports, such as Murmansk, it was also a lot of action.
Right. When you pulled into port in Italy or Murmansk, Russia, and you were invasion force that was nearby and everything, you were strafed day and night. And some of my brother, I know, he said he was 3 days a night. He got no sleep. Just it was one constant plane after another because it was all daylight, and they could bum you 24 hours a day and come in.
One Allied vessel was stuck in the ice and was constantly bombed by German planes?
Right, and they strafed that and bombed that constantly. And see, it was just about 35 miles from Murmansk, Russia, over to where the German held their airfield right on the other side of the mountains. So if they would contact me, and I'd be glad to get them in touch with the reunion and where it's going to be there at Norfolk, Virginia. And that date is April 24th through the 28th, 1985. And tell them to make plans. If anybody's listening, Armed Guard, be there.
I believe, Charles, that you were on one foreign vessel, a Greek cargo ship?
Yeah, we served aboard practically all the cargo ships as gunners. And we had no nationality borders on that thing because we were the ones that really protected the crews and the ammo.
With the exception of Great Britain, which supplied their own armed guards.
The Armed Guard were known as a different thing there, but they did the same job we did on their cargo ship. And they were the DMS, and they were a good outfit. And we just located them. They're having reunions too.
Okay, I didn't mean to be rushing you, but we're practically out of time. Charles, we very much appreciate your coming by. Perhaps one of your organization or yourself could come back again sometime.
Be glad to, John, and because we want to get the word out, and that's the way to get it out, we'd be glad to come back anytime.
We've been talking to Mr. Charles Lloyd of Raleigh, North Carolina. I might mention to our viewers and remind them, please come to the Veterans Day Parade in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina, if you live in this area, Sunday, November 11th, 1984, at 2 p.m. in downtown Raleigh near the Capitol building. Ceremonies will be held near the Capitol right after the parade if weather permits. Thank you very much for watching.